Over the course of 79 days, 14 contestants have competed, and we've gotten down to just 3 people left. Dom, Henry, and Aiden, who now have to make their case to the juries if they want to win the title of Sole Survivor.
Good evening, challengers, and welcome back to Survivor Georgetown for what will surely be an eventful night. The grand finale. Of course, the people that I have to give the most congratulations to have to be our last 3 people. The final 3, one of which will get the title of sole survivor of the first season of Georgetown Survivor. Now, for Henry, Dom, or Aiden, the title could be theirs tonight, which is why we'll start off by hearing them make their case to you, the jury, because you are ultimately in charge of their fate tonight. All right, so with that, we'll be hearing each of them make a case, and we'll move on to questions. Would you like to start us off?
All right, so, hello, jury. Throughout this whole game, these two have been some of my someone's trying to come in. These two have been some of my closest allies, and you guys all know that, but now it's the time where everything can get revealed. I need to vouch to you guys and explain to you guys why there was really one true mastermind in this game, and why it's neither of the 2 people you see sitting up here, despite being in so many votes with me. So my plan to do that is to walk through the entire game. We're gonna go vote by vote, and I'm gonna explain to you what I was doing to control, what I was doing at all parts, and how my gameplay evolved as time went on. So we can start with the Lauren vote, which you guys might not think is that important. However, it really was the catalyst for everything going on in the entire game. Immediately right after we lost the challenge, I contacted Dom and Dav, and we formed sort of an alliance. And we had a plan. We knew that Monty and Caitlin knew each other, and that was an issue. Not only for the game in itself, but for Aiden and I. We couldn't have another duo competing with us. So my number 1 goal was to get Monty up. But I couldn't do that week 1, so I had to plan a backup strategy. Create a guys alliance in order to get their trust from those 3, be able to get information, and in addition, I reached out to Alexa and got her on board so we had the numbers. Finally, right before the vote, it was between Meg and Lauren, who I found out from some of my Frisbee friends actually play on the same team. I reached out to both of them. Meg ended up reaching back out to me, and the fate was sealed because I knew I had somebody I could trust there. The next vote you think I'm going to talk about might be the Monty vote. But I would like to say that I had a strong influence on the Saxa tribe, or on the Hoya tribe, while I wasn't even in it. Nick got voted out next, and as some of you may know, I know Nick from water polo. And I knew that, knowing him from water polo, he's a really sociable guy, he's a really likable guy, and he knows the game of Survivor well. And he would be an extreme threat, despite knowing him, in the game if he could get past the merge. So I decided I needed to talk up a big game to Aiden about how well I knew Nick. I needed to show him that he and I were really close, and plant little seeds in Aiden's mind of how he might be on the chopping block down the line due to Nick and my connection. Due to that, and telling Aiden himself that Nick had to go, he could work his magic through my plan, and the team ended up voting Nick out. And next was the Chorby vote, which is the only vote that I can say I did not have a direct effect in. However, I don't know if it was the right move for Aiden to perform. Chorby and Aiden knew each other beforehand from Latin, and as we probably know, Chorby did not have the best sense of game plan, telling somebody he was voting them out right before doing so. However, he was loyal to Aiden, and he would have stuck with him through the entire game. And unbeknownst to Aiden, there was an alliance between Matt and a couple of the girls that I found out about, and knew that when Aiden voted out Chorby, that kind of sealed his fate in the long run if there had been another vote out prior to the merge. Next, we can go to the Monty vote, where I had two competing alliances. I had me, Alexa, and Meg on one side. I also had full connection between me, Dav, and Dom, and then an adjacent one with Monty. But I was getting information from both sides, from all 5 players who were still in the game, everything they knew, and I was getting texts left and right all day. Fully planned out the vote, we all ended up voting Monty, but I had secured myself safety in the next round. When the merge had happened, I had 4 people who completely trusted me. And so next, sadly, was the Dav vote, and I knew from very early on, through Aiden, that Emily had won the steal vote advantage, which meant that no matter what I tried to do, even if I convinced Aiden to come over to our side, it would still be a 5-5 tie and we would go to rocks. So that was not worth it, and I had to get somebody out of my own tribe. And this is where a plan came into play. I knew that Matt had found an idol from Aiden, from the challenge, the initial challenge where he was scouring for pieces. I also knew that Dav played that exact same challenge. And thinking about it, I thought, if I can somehow get information to the other side, that Dav potentially has an idol, or does, it could get their tribe into thinking, that actually is very plausible. If we need to vote somebody out in their tribe, Dav has got to be the one to go. And so I worked with Meg, who was one of my closest allies at the time, in order to come up with this idea that we told Aiden, who knew it was fake, but was able to tell Matt and the rest of the tribe, and they ended up voting Dav out. I knew this was the best play because while I wasn't anticipating on voting Dav out, he was the one who had to go in order for the safety of the entire game. I also gave Dom a fake idol at that point in case he needed to use it to save himself, which luckily he did. Next is the Caitlyn vote, and here's where I really started taking control of people who I hadn't really been super close with at that point. Not directly, but through the influence of Aiden. Aiden was desperately telling me that we had to vote out another member of my tribe because Matt really wanted to. And despite me telling Aiden that we really have to ping pong the tribes back and forth and keep them even so nobody could suspect it, he said he could just not go against Matt and could not convince Matt otherwise in order to try and keep the numbers even. So I had to think of something fast. I knew that Monty was giving outside information to Caitlyn through Aiden, and I told Aiden that this could be a huge threat to our game. With getting everybody on my tribe on board through my close connections with them, we ended up convincing Aiden, who then convinced Matt and the rest of the tribe to vote out Caitlyn in an almost sweep. And next we come into the double vote out, we came into the double vote out, where I was put in a group of 4, with 3 of the people who were not in my initial tribe. And this is where something I'd been working through the whole game actually came into play. As you might have known and noticed throughout Tribals, I had kind of acted like a moron. I had played a fake idol. I had told everybody that when I had immunity the first week, I wasn't strategizing. And I'm telling you right now, this was all intentional. Because I would always have a pseudo shield in front of myself, where if there was somebody else versus me in this tricky situation, everybody would hope to vote for that other person because they would think they could take me far and wouldn't really put much of a thought into me. And this happened greatly, as after I told Matt, and while playing the fake idol was not part of my plan, it ended up working directly into what I wanted to do, and I could tell Aiden, tell Matt about how big of an idiot I am and how easy it would be to beat me in the finals. He ended up taking me and voting out somebody on his own tribe. As for the other side, I played a role in that too, because I had 2 main goals of this tribe. And as some of you, well actually as Dom knows and Aiden knows, in our room we have a massive chalkboard. And every time before a vote, I would spend so many hours drawing on this chalkboard every single situation that could possibly come out. And it was my plan to really game plan everything that went down. So I would make a plan, Aiden and I would brainstorm it, and then we would execute. My plan, our execution. So we knew that we knew that Matt had an idol, and it had to be flushed because he was getting to the point in the game where he was starting to pick up some speed. We knew that he was potentially going to give the idol to Rachel because information that he had told me, and then I told the rest of my tribe. Rachel, it was not you who ended up telling everybody, it was kind of me who told my own tribe. And so from that point on, I knew that I had to flush out the idol. Dom had immunity, Rachel had to get some votes on her, so sadly that left Alexa and Meg. And while Meg was my closest ally, that left Alexa in the dump in order to have to get voted out. But Meg had come after the vote and showed off her fake idols. And I noticed something was a little fishy here. Because we were close and I had planned on making a couple fake idols in the future, I wanted her to send me her fake congratulations sheet. But when she sent me her sheet, something looked a little fishy and I confronted her. And I asked her, do you have an idol? And what I don't think anybody knows in this game is that Meg in fact did have an idol, and she went out with one. And I knew that. And so now it's time to get into the Meg vote, which yes, she got voted out with an idol. And this is where Aiden and I were on full alliance mode. And so, while we did not win the vote, we had a total plan too. We had known that between our two votes voting together, Rachel and Matt were most likely going to go together. And these two, we thought they were on our side, but we couldn't account for anything, and there was a potential swing vote. We knew that we could tell Meg, if you play your idol, no matter what can happen, we'll at least tie. And from something that Dom said later, actually down the game a couple weeks ago, he said that if we had gone to rocks, he would have swapped back over with us. And I knew that was the case. So, yes, we did not end up winning the vote, but we really had a secure way, if Meg had trusted us to play the idol, that we could have knocked out that vote and ended up getting Matt out. But that didn't happen, and so we're on to the next vote. It was time for Matt, where we were down to 2 of me and Aiden, 2 of him and Rachel, and there was a swing vote. But not necessarily because Dom was a swing vote, but more so because I believe he hadn't made the strongest connections prior to the game. And the biggest connection he had that was still in the game was myself as the next Saxon member, and the only Saxon member. So while yes, he was a swing vote, it was really no question in my mind, and especially with Rachel switching over to our side at the end, that Matt had to go. And this ended up revealing a little bit of something interesting, because Aiden throughout the entire time of the game had told me, Matt is my shield, and I've been controlling Matt as a puppet the entire game. Now, I didn't really see that as the truth, because in prior points throughout the game, I had actually been doing a similar thing with Meg. And people might have thought, there's 2 reasons why these 2 have been voted out pretty early, and we're seeing the biggest threats. I really tried to pose Meg as my shield. And not only was I shielding myself because I was telling people that I wasn't really the strongest player, I also had a shield in her, and there's a reason why she got voted out when these 3 had an easy chance to vote me out. I had no idol, I had nothing saving me, but because she was the bigger threat, because she was making the moves, I was making the moves through her, that was the case. And Aiden told me that he was doing the same thing with Matt, but I didn't necessarily see that as true, because Matt was actually controlling Aiden. As we can see from the start of the game, he told Aiden that we couldn't vote off some of the girls in his alliance because he had an alliance without Aiden. And you can see this as time goes on throughout the game, and more will probably be revealed tonight, but I don't believe that it was the case that Aiden was running their tribe. I think it was Matt running theirs, and as he told me, I was his rival, so I like to consider myself running ours. And finally, with the last vote, pretty simple and clean, Dom had immunity, we were not going to vote each other out, and Rachel had to be the last to go, sadly. And that is finally how we ended up with our final 3. For a closing statement, I know it's been a long speech, but I hope I really showed you that despite not looking like a super huge threat throughout the game, it actually was very tactical. I always put myself in the back lines and let other people do the bidding for me, and stuff mostly went exactly as planned. I was only on the wrong side of 1 vote, and I even controlled votes that I wasn't in. I think there's a reason that these 3 are sitting up here with me tonight, and that was very tactical. I was a challenge threat as Matt and I went toe-to-toe in many challenges with a first, 3 seconds, and a third, which I actually threw the assassin challenge for reasons that I'll explain later in the questioning. And yeah, so I really just want to say that is my speech. I hope I can convince you guys that I played a massive role in this game and really am the reason for everybody sitting where they are tonight.
All right.
Yeah, I'll keep it a little bit briefer than that.
Not a lot to say.
But I think I played a full circle game. So our first challenge, first day survivor, we lost the first challenge because we found our tile first but couldn't finish the word puzzle. During the last challenge, it was pretty similar to the first challenge. I ended up winning because I found the tile after them, but was the first one to complete the puzzle. I think that's emblematic of my game, where I started slow but finished strong towards the end. I did that because my plan going in was I spend the first half of the game focusing more on connections, not overstepping my bounds, not making myself a target, and then once I get people to trust me, bring me halfway through the game, then I can start making my moves, and that was my plan all along. So I think I really did this at the final 6 when I worked with Matt and Rachel to vote out Meg. My goal there really was, I knew Aiden and Matt trusted Aiden at least a bit, but I also knew that these two trusted each other and those two trusted each other. So if I could get Meg out, that would put me firmly in the middle and allow me to have the ability to kind of dictate the next votes and get to the final 3. Here's something I haven't told anyone, but I knew that these two were closer than anyone had let on because I made 2 Instagram accounts in the final 6 called Hidden Immunity Idol GU and Access AO. So basically my plan there was, I don't think anyone really bought it as a real idol, but my goal there was I had 3 clues, and I knew that by people reaching out, I could tell what the dynamics of the final 6 were. So Henry was the first one to reach out, and suddenly Aiden reaches out like half an hour after that. And then Henry texts me like 3 hours later and is like, oh, do you know about this Instagram account? So I knew through that these two are obviously working together as a tight 2. And then Matt and Rachel also reached out within like 30 minutes of each other. So I knew that's a tight 2 there. And if I can wedge myself in the middle and get Aiden to vote for Matt, I allow myself to have this relationship burned where they aren't going to come to each other to work in the final 5, but instead have to work through me in order to get to the end. So that was my plan there. But my secondary function of having that account was it creates a little bit of paranoia. Like I mentioned, I don't think anyone necessarily thought it was a real idol, but by having that in the back of people's minds where maybe there's something out there, it allowed either a vote split or these two and Meg to not be on the same page, where these two voted for Matt, Meg voted for Henry, and that allowed us 3 to pull off a 3-2-1 and then take out Meg without needing a plurality of the votes. Through that account, I think it allowed me to move towards the end with, I was the only one of these 3 that never voted incorrectly at a single tribal council. Every single name I wrote down throughout this game was the person who went home. The only tribal I didn't vote in was the Dav vote, where unfortunately I was going to vote you, Dav, because of what Henry had mentioned, where I was aware of it, but Emily stole my vote. I didn't have the opportunity to vote. Beyond that, every single vote that was written down from the final 6 on, so that was the Meg vote, the Matt vote, and the Rachel vote. Every name that was written down either by me or by anyone else, the plan that would have had to happen in order for that person to go home involved me. So at the final 6 vote, when Meg went home, obviously me, Matt, Rachel voted Meg out. These 2 voted for Matt, and in order for that to happen, I would have had to vote for them. Meg voted for Henry. In order for that to happen, I would have had to have been on board because she told me about it and would have had to bring these 2 on board too. At final 5, Matt went home. Obviously, the other 4 of us voted for Matt. But in order for Henry to have gone home, it would have had to be me bringing me and Rachel voting for Henry as well. And then at the final 4, Rachel went home. Us 3 voted for Rachel. But if Aiden were to have gone home, I would have had to vote with Rachel in order to send it to the tiebreaker because Henry admitted to me that he would never turn on Aiden no matter what. So I think having the ability to know about every single plan in the final 3 votes and still never be targeted, never have my name really thrown out, never receive a vote. The only tribal I received votes was the final 10, where I was the secondary option to Dav as a split vote. And I still think I started slow, but I was able to make moves when they counted, and in the final 6, final 5, and final 4, really had left my footprint on this game and was in charge of all those votes. So it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish, and I think that's my pitch for you guys.
Right. Thank you, Dom.
Jury, I believe that the person who should win Survivor is the one who controlled their own destiny the most throughout the game. The person who got to the end by the least amount of luck and by the least amount of riding the coattails of others, and I believe that was me. I could go through every single move, every single person that was voted out the whole season, but I'm going to focus on 2 or 3 big key moves, and I'm going to focus on the overall point of how throughout the entire season there wasn't a single vote where I was even an option to go home, and I'll explain that as I go. So I think the 3 most pivotal moves were as follows. Number 1 was the merge. At the merge, it was 5-5, but of course Emily had the extra vote. So the original Hoyas had the majority. which meant that going forward, if I wanted to, I could have stuck with the Hoyas, and we could have knocked out every person on the Saxes and made it all the way to the end. I could have chosen to do that, and that would have left these two sitting on the jury. I will continue to talk about this, but I don't believe there was a single moment where either of these two could have ever gotten me out. So after the dab vote was the vote where we got Caitlin. I was the one behind getting Caitlin out, and I wanted her out for three main reasons. Number one, Thorpe had told me that in his vote, the one where we voted him out, you had told him to vote for me. So I knew that if I had stuck with the Hoyas and went all the way to the end with you five, there was a very likely chance that I was going to be the first one knocked off. Secondly, I wanted to keep the Hoyas and the Saxes exactly even, because that left the possibility at any vote for Henry to flip to my side and vote out any one of his Saxes, or me to flip to his side and vote out any Hoya. So as long as we kept the numbers even throughout the whole season, we controlled every single vote. And then the third reason, which I think is the most important and the biggest strategic move I made throughout this whole season, was using Meg as the scapegoat for why I made moves. After the Caitlin vote, or before the Caitlin vote, I called that sort of emergency meeting with Matt and Rachel. And I had essentially told Meg, they're not 100% on board with getting Caitlin out. You're gonna have to come and say, essentially, I stuck with you guys on the dab vote. I'm gonna need you guys to prove your trust by voting out one of your own this week. So I had Meg come. Meg was able to help me convince you two to do the plan, and then we filled in Emily after that. Once I got Caitlin out, obviously, it was the split vote, where we split off into 4 and 4. And that was another extremely pivotal move for me, because I essentially controlled Henry's destiny in my hands. I could have easily let him go. I don't think there was a single moment in the entire game where he put his ass on the line to save me. I put my ass on the line to save him. And not only was I in control of him leaving, I had to convince Matt to also keep him and vote out one of his closest allies. Me being able to convince Matt to vote out one of his closest allies to keep someone who he wasn't really working with, I think that shows a lot. And then again, immediately after that vote was when I had to review, because Matt had this information that the fact that he had an idol, everybody on the Saxons knew that. So I knew I was going to get caught up in a lie. I had to tell him. And I told him. But I told him for a very strategic reason. I was able to continue to play up the fact that Meg was sort of manipulating me, and I was a weak player who was getting controlled by Meg. This was then back-to-back votes where I was able to talk to my tribe and be like, oh, sorry, I'm the victim. Meg controlled me. She manipulated me to get what she wanted. And this 100% worked, because when we had the survey challenge, almost half the people voted that Meg was the best player. When pretty much every move that Meg made was that people thought Meg made was what I really did. Going back to my original point of how I controlled my own destiny the most. Up until Final 6, I don't think I was ever considered to go home. Nobody ever voted me. Nobody talked. I never heard any rumors of me going home at all. But after I put my ass on the line to save Henry, I knew people were going to start to pick up on the fact that Henry and I were working together. And that's when I knew I had to kick the challenge game into high gear. Before then, you guys cannot believe me. The proof is in my confessionals. I threw every single challenge up until Final 6. That's why I was so bad. Specifically, the Frisbee one, I actually was thinking about winning it. But when I got into the Final 4 with Matt, Henry, and Meg, me, my closest ally, my second closest ally, and Henry's closest ally, I was like, there's no point in winning this. I'm going to get what I want regardless, and I threw that one. And then from that point on, I realized that Henry had sort of presented himself as a big challenge threat. And therefore, if we ever got caught as being roommates, people would consider him the bigger threat than me because he was better at challenges. Once we got to Final 6, however, I knew that it was time to kick it into high gear, and I won back-to-back immunities, which brings me to Final 4. At 4, you could say that was the first vote that I guess, time where I could have been voted out. My destiny was not in my own hands. But it was a foregone conclusion that Henry and I were never going to turn on each other. Therefore, at the absolute worst case, if Dom voted with Rachel, I would have had the chance to do fire, to make it to the end, which still, my destiny's in my own hands. So essentially, like I said at the beginning, the whole game, I was the only one that was really never an option to go home. And I think that's proven by the fact that I never had a single vote against the entire game until one meaningless vote in the Final Four by Rachel. And even if you say I had one vote against me the entire season, that is significantly less than everybody else sitting here. And that is why I am sitting here today. Thank you.
A lot of love from the audience tonight for those 3 fantastic speeches. Jury, you clearly have a lot on your mind, especially after what they've just told you. So I wanted to give you all the opportunity, as we do, to say your piece, to ask a question, to make a case. All right, which means, Monty, you'll get first.
I'm curious how the roommate dynamic will evolve after the Survivor. How will you still be roommates for the next half of the year?
It's an interesting question. And so I have to say, the real reason why Aiden and I are going to be such strong roommates for the rest of the year is because we never turned on each other. There was never a moment throughout the entire game, and you see him nodding his head, where I ever had a thought of voting him out. He never had a thought of voting me out. And despite me telling Rachel otherwise, that was never a thought in my head. Because I knew that there was one person I could trust 100% in this game, and he knew the exact same thing as me. And so while we are enemies tonight, we've been friends the entire way through, and we have said what happens in this room, stays in this room. Aww. And that's why I think we're gonna
Completely agree with everything he said, and the testament to that fact is I think it was a terrible strategic move that these 2 didn't vote me out in the last vote. And the fact that he didn't do that proves the fact that we were always going to stay aligned and we'll always stay friends.
Sounds like a very strong vote. Tried and tested. All right. Dad, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. What would have been your strategy in the game if you didn't have Aiden? And do you think you would have made it to that without him?
All right, so as I said before, I was pretty much in control of the Saxa tribe pre-merge. I had full communication from Alexa and Meg, who were giving me everything in our little 3. I had full communication from you and Dom, who were giving me information in our little 3. And the people who I wasn't quite as close with, in Monty and Lauren, I had gotten out of the game. And so I do feel like, while I'm not sure how each individual vote would have gone, I had enough allies in my circle who really trusted me 100%, and I trusted it as well, that I could have made it just as far. I don't know if the others can say the same about that. I'm not going to comment on that. But I feel like with a solid group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who really trusted each other, you can make it unbelievably far in this game. And I think with me having full access to those 4 people's, all their information, I was bound to have enough information and enough support and enough allegiance to make it here. Along with looking at the other tribe, I was able to make close connections with the people on the other side. And while they might not have been real connections, and they might have more been in terms of gameplay, there was still something there, and I was able to both hold my own tribe as good close allies and make some new ones to have full information in my side. And I think I would have been here too as well.
Caitlin, I see you smiling.
Hi guys, congratulations for getting to this point in the game. This is fantastic. One thing I just wanted to touch on, which I think is very funny given the group we have here as the final 3, is that in the beginning, we actually had an alliance between Emily, Rachel, Matt, and I. Just the 4 of us. We didn't have any association with Aiden. We kind of kept him out of the loop. It was because we had first aligned at a birthday party at the beginning. We happened to be the only people from Survivor to show up who happened to also all be Saxas or Hoyas, and we started to align from there. So my question is kind of for everyone. So away from strategy in the game, but more towards your perspective and the relationships you've made along the way. Let's do an question. But in a Survivor fashion, I would like to say, away from strategy, away from gameplay, who would you be willing to align, give an immunity idol to, and vote out?
Great question. Well, since we had you start, lovely Henry, for our opening questions, let's start off with Aiden.
So of people on the jury, I think.
Yeah.
I would have given my idol to Matt. Matt was my second closest ally after Henry. And despite the fact that I backstabbed him, I worked with him
Unsuccessfully.
for as long as I possibly could. And I knew I had to take him out because he was a big threat. But he was the person I trusted the most. I guess for a line, it would be Rachel. Rachel never did anything against me. Similarly, I turned my back on her like I turned my back on Matt. But when I didn't vote with you guys, when I voted Matt out. But she proved that she was a loyal Alliance member. And what was the last one? Who would vote out?
Yeah.
I would vote out Caitlin. I feel like that was the move that I made at the time. I think that was maybe my most pivotal move, and I stick by that.
All right, Dom.
Okay, so given idol 2, I think I go Rachel. Rachel and I really had not talked much Survivor at all until the final 8 tribal council. We were split 4-4. But through that, I think we were able to both kind of incorporate the games we had up until that point, and we're both connected with everyone else left in the game, but just bridge that gap together. And I think we voted together at the final 8. We voted together to get Meg out. We voted together to get Matt out. And then unfortunately, I did have to turn on her at final 4, but mainly that reason was because we had been so close in those last 2 votes. And I think it's not as much my credit if Rachel and I are both sitting up here together. So I think through that, really trusted her, and she'd be who I give the idol to. What's the second one? Alliance. I think I go Alexa for Alliance. Honestly, throughout this entire game, and you said outside the game as well. Alexa, I have seen her so many times outside, and we always say hi to each other. Not that I don't say hi to the rest of you, but Alexa and I just think I run into her more than anyone else, and super pleasant. And also within the game, we voted together on every single vote. So as an alliance goes, voting together is the most important part. And then the third piece is vote out. Honestly, I would probably say, I guess I might go Caitlin as well, just because we didn't have the opportunity. We just didn't have the opportunity to talk much in the game because we were on separate tribes pre-merge, and once we got to merge, we just didn't have the opportunity to talk before you were on this game. So nothing personal in the slightest. Just how the cookie crumbles.
All right, so who would I choose to align with? Not to piggyback off you, but I'm gonna have to say Alexa. And for very similar reasons. Alexa and I think every single time I've been in Leo's, maybe the entire year we've seen each other, maybe every single time. And I feel like her and I actually had a really close connection throughout the game. It was unfortunate that she was the one who had to get voted out in the split vote. And I really was sad about that because it was unfortunate circumstances, and it wouldn't have been the case if there wasn't a split. But I feel like her and I actually formed a really strong bond from the start of the game, both from just seeing each other outside just randomly, and also having a lot of talks throughout the game. And even when things were looking a little rocky between us, we ended up coming back together and really working it out. And that's the best thing you can have in somebody in an alliance. I think for Idol, I would have to go with Meg. I just wish she would have played it for herself. I do think that she was the one, other than Aiden, who I was the number one close with throughout this game. She was my, I like to say number 1, but I guess really number 2 throughout the whole game. And I just really feel like if I had a chance to save her throughout this game and get to know her a little bit more and keep her in my close circle as a friend and throughout the game, I feel like I would have done that. And then you know this one's coming. Vote out. It's got to be my rival, Matt. And so I think I was yes, I got very excited when I voted him out. We all know about that. But I think it was just Matt and I had a strong rivalry throughout the game. We were there always in challenges, neck and neck. I perceived, I think, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but we were kind of the heads of our clans, the heads of our alliances, our tribes. And I think it just ended up coming down to there were so few people we had to clash heads. And you know what? While I had to vote you out, I think you can agree it was a fun battle that we had for the entire game. So I desperately want to be friends with you after, but let's just wait a couple more minutes and we can do that.
We'll see how his question goes. All right, excellent. Thank you, the three of you. Our lovely Emily.
Okay, so want to reiterate congratulations to the three of you. You did what all of us wish we could have done. So my question is for the roommates. So my question is, what is one thing your roommate did differently from you that you think makes them more deserving of Soul Survivor? And what's one thing they did differently that you think hurt their game and makes you more deserving of Soul Survivor?
Why the question? How about you start us off, actually?
Okay, I go first. I think the strongest thing that Aiden has going for him for why he should win the Soul Survivor is his dedication to the game. And I'll say this, he loves freaking Survivor. He could be anybody in any sort of Survivor trivia challenge, but that doesn't have really to do with the game. There were so many times that, I think the strongest time where I can say he was so dedicated to the game was, and I joke about this, when he literally stayed in his room for over a day, locked in a room, and here's our other roommate who can vouch for that. And he decided, I need to win this immunity challenge. We had planned earlier for him to win this immunity challenge. I'd gotten out, I'd actually had to fly out to Boston for reasons. And so he had to win this challenge for us. And he decided, you know what, I'm gonna do it. And the best way possible to do that, we decided, was just stay in the room. And that's what he did, and he was dedicated. He said, very bored. Was it very boring? But that shows his dedication, that he was going to lock himself in the room for a whole day, miss any sort of events, miss classes that he had to go to, but really stick to the game because he really loved the game and wanted to get this far. I think something that, the other question was something that he could have improved on? Or?
That kind of made him not as deserving.
Okay.
His biggest mistake.
And I think this is going to kind of go off the same vein. Aiden likes to spend a lot of the time in the room. And so I feel, while I was doing a lot of time strategizing and doing the background work, there was a lot of time where Aiden was there for sure, and this is no discredit to him, but he was kind of more of a checker of my idea, especially I say with his chalkboard, and I think in order for him, he could have had a little bit more of a say in where the vote was going to go. He executed the vote perfectly, just as I did, but I just wish he could have had a little more say in how we were going to get from point A to point B.
So I'll start with what I think Henry is really good at. I think he was 24/7 thinking about the game. Anytime we got any inkling that there was an idol out there, that there was an advantage of some sort, he was always out looking. And I guess you could call me lazy. The first week I looked for like 2 or 3 hours one day and I didn't find anything. And for the rest of the season, I was kind of like, I don't think I'm ever going to find one. I'm going to focus my game on strategy. But he was always out there. He found, despite it being a fake, he still found that idol.
It wasn't that hard to find out.
But that was a testament to you going to the challenge 10 minutes early or whatever to look for an idol because you suspected that there was going to be an idol. So I think that was one of the strengths of Henry's game. While he says that I was the checker piece, I'm going to flip back on that. I think that I controlled most of the strategy throughout the season, and I could point to any number of you that I was behind you going home. But I think that like I said in my speech, I put my ass on the line more to save him than he did for me.
All right, Alexa.
Congratulations for making it this far. I know that you all worked very hard. Part of becoming the Soul Survivor is about adapting to challenges like different alliances, different actual challenges, and all kinds of twists, right? Given this information, many survivors make grave mistakes that land them amongst my peers in the jury. I want you to talk about your biggest mistake and how you overcame this to sit where you are right now.
Yeah, Aiden, start something.
My biggest mistake was trying to vote out Matt at 6. I was thinking I should do it for one main reason. I felt that every post-merge vote prior to Matt was my doing. And I think Henry knew that each one of those votes was my doing. And I knew I had to lay out a little rope and let Henry think he was making one big move so that if we got to the end, he would think that he could argue in his favor against me sitting right here. So, despite it being in my favor, probably, to stick with Rachel and Matt for one more vote, and for me to vote out either Meg or Dom, because that would have kept me close with you guys. You guys would have known I was trustworthy, and then I would have still had Henry in my back pocket. I wanted to let him make a move so that if we made it to the end, he would take me and not consider backstabbing me. That wound up not working out because clearly the people that he was aligned with the whole time didn't trust him. That's why they didn't stick with us. Whereas my people stuck with me the whole time. And that was my one mistake. But to be fair, I decided to make that move when I had immunity. So even if it backfired, I was still safe. But that was definitely my biggest mistake. I should have taken out Meg or Dom and then gone for Matt the next week.
Yeah. I think my biggest mistake was honestly at the merge, just not reaching out to Caitlin, not reaching out to Emily, and not talking to Rachel until Final 8. I think going into the merge, obviously it wound up with me sitting here, but just not fostering relationships inside the game with you guys wasn't great as far as that merge vote. Dav was the one who went home. I was the secondary option, but I think part of that was due to me not fostering that relationship, and that was the vote I was most vulnerable. And had I reached out, had I started to do something outside of working with Henry, working with Meg, and then both of them were having their information funneled through Aiden, I felt confident that I could survive that vote. But going forward, if a different domino fell throughout the merge where one of these two gets picked off and suddenly my information pipeline gets cut off, without fostering those relationships with you, if you guys went deeper into the game, then I would have had issues come up later on. So it worked out for me, and it allowed me to take control in the back half of the merge, but the front half of the merge, I do admit I was very vulnerable because I wasn't reaching out and starting those conversations earlier.
All right, so I'm not gonna say the obvious one. Well, the fake idol was definitely a blunder on my game. I do think that it ended up helping me in the long run with kind of making this pseudo shield around me of seeming like not the greatest player. So I'm not gonna say that because I actually think it turned out in my benefit. I am gonna, however, go with a chance that I had to easily win the game, and I think I could have won the game pretty 100% if I had chosen to get this guy out. In the Final Four, Rachel had come up to me and honestly gave me a really, really convincing speech, where while I didn't genuinely consider it, I thought that this could really turn some heads if I did this. We could have a different Final 3 up here. I won't say that I was blinded by the friendship because I knew from the start of the game 100% Aiden and I were not turning our backs on each other, and I couldn't go. And even with the chance to win the game, I couldn't be the one to take him out just for our friendship. But I do feel like that if I had won and made that move, and from us talking later, I said, "How mad would you have been if I voted you out?" And you said, "You'd be upset, but you could get over it."
I would have been happy with him if you voted me out.
So in the long run, knowing that he wouldn't have been actually pissed, I probably would have gone and done that. But this erring on the side of cautiousness for a true friend, I decided to lay off. And I'm still here, so.
All right, Meg.
Alright, I did have a question prepared, but I no longer want to ask it. It was directed at Dom, but instead of getting an answer from you, I'd like to give you some answers, because it appears that there are some things that you're just learning about now at this point in the game, so I'd like to fill you in on some things. Do I have to stand? Specifically, my vote off. It seems like you're just finding out tonight that I had an idol. So I'm going to assume that you also didn't know that Aiden and Henry told me to play that idol because they knew that you were trying to vote me off. They knew that Rachel and Matt were also going to go along with that plan, and they wanted Matt out. So they wanted me to play my idol, flush my idol, and get Matt out without splitting the vote. I had not decided to go along with that plan because I had figured out, after asking why I was being targeted, that Henry and Aiden were the ones really running the game, because when everybody started telling me why I was such a big threat, I realized that all these moves that I was credited for were actually theirs. And I went to you and I told you this information, and you didn't seem to even entertain the idea of voting Henry out. And honestly, I don't think that you're responsible for getting me out. I think that it was Rachel and Matt who were, because I had gone to them and I had told them this plan. I had told them that we need to get Henry out. Aiden obviously had immunity, And it seemed like they were really willing to do that. And I think the vote that night was partly up to them, partly up to me playing my idol. And I think that I went home because they ultimately decided not to vote for me and because I was an idiot and didn't play the idol. So, truthfully, I don't think you were responsible for that vote. Also, I'm still so confused on why you decided to take these two to the end, because I told you that vote that they were the ones who made all the moves, and I told you that they were doing it through me, and one of them had to go, eventually both of them. And then it came out that they were roommates and they were really running the game, and you still, at no point in this game, cast a vote for either of them. Not one, like, you didn't cast a vote for Henry, you didn't cast a vote for Aiden, never. So, I'm so confused on why you let them get to the end, and honestly, I think that was your biggest mistake in the game.
Dom, do you want to say
Was it directed to the question? I guess.
No, it wasn't a question.
Not a question. Seeing as it seemed to be addressed to you, do you want to say something? If not, we'll move on to the next question.
I mean, I will say something. Yes, I did not know you have an idol. I'm not going to act like I knew you had an idol. You had informed me about your clue a few weeks before, and you mentioned the clue in the final 8 tribal council. At that point, I assumed you might have something, but I don't know for sure. Obviously, yes, I'm sitting next to these two roommates. They work together the entire game. But I think I wanted to do that in part. I do think in part of my thought process there was maybe they'll split votes, maybe I can create agency for myself where if they split votes, I can get a few votes there. Yes, you did pitch to me, let's get Henry out right at the final 6. And at no point, I'm not gonna say you're wrong because that conversation was like half an hour before tribal, and at that point, yes, my mind was made up. But I do still think I was locked in with Matt and Rachel at that point where we were gonna vote you out, and none of the information that was brought to me was, I guess, enough to convince me to vote out Henry. And is that one of the mistakes in my game? If I could re-answer my biggest mistake in that game, maybe so. But at that point, when I had committed to voting you out because I saw you as one of the biggest threats, you and Matt as the two biggest threats. Once I committed to that vote, at that point, Matt still remains the biggest threat, and then Rachel shares the most of similarities in the second half of the merge with my game. So those two are my biggest threats after you go home. So my only option at that point was to sit next to these two and try to pitch my case against them.
Lots of food for thought. All right.
Okay, I want to say, just like Meg thinks that was your biggest mistake, I think that was also my biggest mistake. I just wanted to say that for your sake. Anyways, to my question. Just so you guys know, my decision is far from made. You still all have a chance for my vote, and this is how this question is really going to help me decide, okay? Even you, Henry, you still have a chance for my vote. Kidding. Anyways, okay, so Aiden and Henry. I still think that it's extremely, extremely unfair that you two had someone in the game that you could rely on 100%. None of the rest of us had that luxury except maybe Monty and Caitlin, but I don't even think that's necessarily true. And like strong, loyal relationships like mine and Rachel's had to be built within the context of the game of Survivor, which is obviously a very hard place to develop trust. But even Rachel and I, we didn't share everything, and we both worked against each other at times to support our own game. And like, because of that, I want you two to both tell me something that you chose not to share with the other, something that will shock the other about how you played this game that the other still doesn't know. And I want this to be good, because that's the only way that you two are going to win my vote. And I want you to think about it while I ask Dom a question first. The way I see it, and I kind of disagree with Meg about this, you took control of the game at Final 6. You chose, for those last 3 votes, you chose the person that benefited your game to go home the most, and you found the votes to make it happen. Like, yes, it was me and Rachel's decision to go between you or Henry, but Dom convinced us to go with him, which is part of Survivor, right? And not to mention that you had probably the most impressive challenge comeback in that final immunity challenge. That was like 20-minute deficit, amazing. Very impressive, but before Final 6, like we kind of talked about, I saw you as probably the least impressive player, even in the Final 8, probably, you know? And I don't think you should win the game based solely on the last 3 votes, despite how amazing you and like how much you control those last 3 votes. So tell me something about your game before the final 6 that will change my opinion that you were unimpressive.
Yeah. I'm not gonna argue that I was not that I was the flashiest player before the final 6, because I wasn't. I sat there and I knew that I had Henry as a source. Henry and I talked after the first challenge, and Henry was feeding things to me. And I knew, I did not know to the full extent that they were roommates, but I knew that Henry had connections to Aiden outside the game, because throughout the game we've seen them together, walking around, conversing. Here they are in the final 3. But I knew they had connections through there. I also was talking to Meg pretty heavily. Obviously at the final 6, I made the decision to send her home. But before that, I knew that both Meg and Henry were telling me what Aiden was telling them on the other side. And I figured my time will come eventually to be able to flip things and make the move. But I thought that before the final 6, I felt comfortable in the spot I was at where I could continue to get information from everyone, and I would be able to advance myself through the game to get to that point. Did I make a flashy move where I controlled a certain vote? I think Henry and I can share credit for maybe the Lauren vote out before. He says he's a mastermind on both our pre-merge vote outs. I think I also share the credit for the Monty vote before the merge. I'm not going to take credit for the final 10 vote where Dab went home. Definitely can't do that. Can't take credit for the Caitlin vote. But I trusted the people. I built relationships early enough in the game that gave me enough trust that I would be able to get to the final 7. And I think there's something to say about that. I was voted most honest at the final 6 challenge, and I think that was the facade I was trying to put up to get to that point where if everyone viewed me as most honest, you can tell me information and you think I'm gonna work with you no matter what. And if I built that up, then when I get to the final 6, then I can start making moves. And that's what I did. I think I executed it well, but it's up for you guys to decide whether or not that's enough for me to win this game.
So this is something that I have not told anybody, including Aiden, and it was a move that I would have loved to make in the game, but due to circumstances from the producers, I was unable to do so, and I will explain So after the vote, after Caitlin's vote, I believe it was 4-4 in terms of who was on each side of the tribe. And Aiden and I had made an agreement beforehand that we really wanted to ping pong it back and forth. We get one out on my side, we get one out on his side, and we continue. However, we hadn't decided when we get down to 4-4 who would take the next blow. And Aiden kept telling me that Matt wouldn't be satisfied unless we took out another one of my tribe. And I thought, that just can't happen. Because I want to have a little bit more control in this game. I want to have some people around me that I really liked. So I decided to go into action mode. I had seen Meg had used her advantage in the rolling on the ground challenge. And so I'd seen what a potential advantage looked like. So I went in on the internet and I created my own. And I stuck it outside this guy's LXR. I don't know if you saw it, I don't think you did, because it wasn't up for very long. My plan was, if I could get him to think that there was an extra vote out there, then he would tell me and he would tell Aiden. And Aiden would think, oh, there's an extra vote out in play. He has to come to our side because there would be no point of him sticking with you guys. And therefore, I could control the game by having us gain or not lose another member without me actually having to spread any real lies, because this would all be coming from Dom to me to Aiden, and it would seem so genuine because according to everybody, it was. Now, sadly, that was the vote where we ended up splitting off into 4-4, so right after that happened, the challenge, I went and took it down because I didn't want to have further complications, but I really wish that that could have been pulled off because that would have been a way where I could have had a little more control in this game, if only you saw it or if we hadn't done that sort of split. But that is something I've never told Aiden.
Did you know about that?
No, but it also didn't work, so it doesn't matter. The one thing I never told Henry was that the entire game I was planning on voting him out at 4. Until I reached a point where I was so confident that I would beat him in a final tribal that it was better that I brought him to the end because we played so closely together. But I did just that much more, such as, like I said many times, saving him at that 2-2 split, that it was most beneficial for me to bring him to the end. But like I said, I would have been so pleased with him if he took me out. If I was in his position, I would have taken him out.
Interesting. No, I didn't know that, but clearly my stupidity plan worked on him too.
Wow. Okay, I have a lot to think about. Thank you.
Wow. Well, that's a lot. And now we get to our last but never the least. Please, go for it.
Thank you so much. Congrats to all the finalists. It's been a pleasure playing the game with you. With that being said, I'm going to address my questions to Dom and Aiden because that is who will be deciding who will be deciding to vote for. My first question is for Dom. When you made the fake idol, did you, while you were making it, did you actually think that it wasn't going to be bought by any of us, or were you trying to make it realistic? And did you actually hide anything on the Levy Esplanade?
Yes, I did not hide anything on the Levy Esplanade because I didn't think I would need to hide anything on the Levy Esplanade. I think it would honestly be more unrealistic had I hidden something because someone could see it, compare it to a real idol, and be like, this isn't what it is. I think not hiding something created more paranoia because if it was real, on the very off chance it was real, and no one else could find it when they went to search, oh, someone else, the other person who got the third clue, might have found it before everyone else, and then that creates paranoia in that sense. I went into it not necessarily trying to convince people it was real, but trying to convince, my main focus was the 3 clue part, because I thought people would believe it was real enough to take the gamble to try to reach out and get that clue, and that's all I needed, because if Henry reached out and tried to get the first clue and then Aiden reached out right after, that's the only information I was going for as far as the fake idol, because that proves to me they're type 2, I already knew that, but it more solidified it, proved to me you 2 are type 2 when you reached out back to back, and it just was an information creator more so than an actual like paranoia type thing to put into it.
And for Aiden, towards the end of the game, you started waiting after tribal council was over to try to apologize to the person that you were voting out. So I was wondering, do you stand by the way that you played maybe the social game, the way that you're talking to us, and the way that you voted? Or would you do anything differently, maybe to be nicer so that the apology wasn't necessary? Or was it always your plan to apologize after the vote?
That's a really good question. Every person that I voted out, I felt bad about, especially you 2, since you 2 never turned your back on me, and I understand that. I always felt that in the game of Survivor, if you clue anyone in, you even give them 10 minutes of notice that they're gonna be going home, they can scramble something together, they can make up a lie, they can find an idol, they can do whatever, they can sort of salvage the situation. And so I always felt that while I did feel bad blindsiding people, it had to be done to ensure that the moves I wanted to happen happened. I really did mean my apologies afterwards. I wish I could have apologized before because I did truly feel bad and I liked all of you despite voting you out. But I had to do it for strategic purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
And with that, we finish our wonderful line of questioning. Thank you so much to our wonderful jury members. I think I speak at least for the 3 of us and definitely for the producers, and of course, probably for our audience members too. When we just say that it's been such a pleasure having you all on with us. We've really loved it. We've been so lucky to have you. And of course, as is customary, we will have our lovely candidates for your guys' vote give their final little piece to try and convince you to vote for them.
I'll be really brief. I pretty much have said everything that I wanted to say. Like I said, I think the person that deserves to win is the one who controlled their own destiny the most. I feel like that was me. All the way up till Final 6, I was never even a consideration to go home. Then I picked up the challenge game. I won 6 and 5, and then I relied on my trust to survive the 4 votes. So that lays out the 3 parts of the game. There's the challenge part of the game, there's the trust, social part of the game, and there's the strategic part of the game. I was never a consideration to go home. I'm tied for the most immunities on the season, and I did not receive a single vote against the entire season until the final 4, which was, like I said, pretty much a meaningless vote. I think I deferred Henry and I played this game really closely together, but I think I deferred myself. Like I said, I saved him at the merge. I could have stuck with the Hoyas, but I kept him in. I saved him at the 2-2 split, and he never has done anything of equal capacity to save me, so I'm more responsible for him being there than I am being there. So vote for who you think played the best game, and thank you.
Yeah. I think I also laid out most of my case, but I do want to address the trust and social game that these 2 keep talking I honestly think I went into this game, like most of you, not knowing a single person here, and I do think it was a tremendous advantage for both of them to have someone, like Henry said, I would trust 100%, never vote out no matter what, and always trust he's telling me the truth. Whether or not that was my mistake to bring both of them here is one question, but the other question is, how much of an advantage is it that they 100% know everything that's going on in the game? Aiden's like, oh, my name never came up before the final 6, but that's because, yes, he got through the pre-merge, but as the merge went on, he had Henry watching his back and letting him know every single thing that went on in this game as he was informing Henry. So when you have two people that will share all their information, that ruins almost like the main challenge of Survivor, which is deciding who you can trust or who you can't trust. So it's up to you whether you value that and value that they were able to pull off games to the end together, or if you're able to value the final 6, final 5, final 4. I know Meg brought up final 6 was not necessarily my decision, it was their decision. But like Matt said, I think I convinced them to go with that plan. I also think at the final 6, final 5, final 4, regardless of whether or not it was my decision or Matt and Rachel's decision to keep Meg in the game, it wasn't their decision. And the final 5 wasn't their decision either because Rachel and I could have decided to keep Matt in this game. Final 4 wasn't their decision either because Henry was never going to flip on Aiden and I could have decided to take Aiden out. So I think the final 3 votes really were up to me and not up to them. Whether or not you guys agree is what you'll decide when you vote, and whether or not you value the entirety of the game or whether or not you value a strong finish, whether or not you value knowing someone outside the game and being able to leverage that as a great strategic move or an advantage in the game that is unfair. That's your decision, and I respect whatever decision you make.
And like these two have said, I believe I've given a strong case and have stated most of everything I want to say. I just want to reiterate a couple points, and I want everybody to think for a second. Moves that you have made, and people thought in the past, coming into this vote, I assume, from what I've said in Tribal, from how I've acted, that I may have not been the biggest threat, that I may have not been the #1 target. And I know that because people never voted me out. But I want you to just everybody take a second to stop and think about what you heard tonight and really think, was he a threat in a vote that I had no clue he was a threat in? And I think you have to think about that because while you may have thought that I wasn't some player in the long run, I think I've given you my case because now I can share with everybody what really went down of how I was able to manipulate this game while also forming friendships and while also really making sure I had a stronghold. Aiden says that he was able to save me because he wanted to. And I would agree with that. Actually, that's not true. I disagree with that. I would say Aiden saved me because he had to. I saved Aiden because I wanted to. Aiden could not have survived in this game with the alliances that he had lacked a formed pre-merge. I had my group of who would stick with me till the end, and while Aiden definitely had groups who he would stick with, clearly it's evident that he would turn on them in the long run. However, whenever I chose to give information to Aiden, it was really out of that trust and that friendship that he and I had for the long term, and he knows that he's shaking his head. Because I wanted to take Aiden to the end of this game, and I really believe that, yes, I believe I have a better case than him, and he believes that he has a better case than me, and Dom believes he's a better case than both of us. I think that it really now is in your hands, and I hope that you guys can make the right choice.
Wow. Thank the 3 of you for such wonderful, fantastic statements. I'm sure the jury, you guys obviously have your work cut out for you. I know that you have all watched these people play and how much you've loved to watch them grow, to watch them conquer these challenges, and of course, to face each other at the final 3. And now, of course, the famous little section of our final tribal for the entirety of the first season of Survivor. It's time to vote. All right, Monty, you're up. First vote. Dom. 7 more votes to go. Vote number 2. Aiden.
Yeah!
Number 3. Henry. All right, everyone, you 3 All right, 5 more votes to go. Okay. Aiden leads the group. 2 votes Aiden, 1 vote for the rest of our lovely contestants, and 4 more votes to go. Aiden, that's Aiden. 4 votes Aiden, and of course,
It was a lot of fun. Thank you all. This was the best thing I did this semester. Just want to say that, and I love you all, and I hope we all stay friends.
Right. Congratulations, Aiden, for being our first sole survivor of Georgetown Survivor. And congratulations to both of you for a wonderfully played game. Thank you all so much for what's been an amazing season. We'll see you next time.